through the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring the questions and we'll try to address as many of them as possible during the Q&A session after the discussion. If you experience any technical issues, please reach out to my colleague Lisa at lisa.accardi@refed.org. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome to today's webinar, Repurpose with a Purpose, a look behind the new toolkit for food service professionals. Refed is co-hosting this webinar with our friends at the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, and we have some great panelists representing the University of North Texas, Cornell University, Boston University, and Vanderbilt University, as well as our very own Selena Mao. Thank you so much for joining us today. The beginning of this year is always a busy time for everyone, and so we're grateful for you taking the time to sit with us and explore this toolkit. My name is Nate Clark, and I'm part of the communications team at Refed. For those of you who are not familiar with Refed, we're a US-based nonprofit working to catalyze the food system toward evidence-based action to stop wasting food. The goal of Refed's work is to increase the adoption of food waste solutions. One way that we do that is through events and webinars like this, which can help inform the work that all of you out there are doing. Before we get into the conversation, I want to share a few quick announcements. Registration is now open for our 2025 Refed Food Waste Solutions Summit on June 23rd through 25th in Seattle, Washington. And for a limited time, you can register at a special early bird discounted rate. This is the lowest price that you'll be able to get a summit ticket for, so take advantage of it if you can. You can find additional information and will be able to register for the summit at summit.refed.org. Food Waste Prevention Week 2025 will take place April 7th through 13th, and we're hosting 2 information sessions with the Food Waste Prevention Week team to explain how you and your organization can become an official partner for the week. The first session will be held on January 30th, and the second session will be held on February 18th. Sign up to learn more, and you can get a sneak peek into this year's exciting theme, access simplified tools and resources to make your efforts impactful, and discover how you can inspire change in your community. Check the chat for the links to register. As I mentioned, today we're excited to partner with the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative to talk about the new Repurpose with a Purpose toolkit for food service professionals. Restaurants and food service operations generated about 13 million tons of surplus food in 2023, nearly 80% of which went to landfill. In back-of-house operations, overproduction is the leading cause of wasted food. An effective solution to address this challenge is repurposing or upcycling overproduced surplus food into new and delicious menu items that diners will love. The Repurpose with a Purpose toolkit has been specifically designed for food service professionals like restaurant managers, chefs, and dining operators to offer actionable, cost-effective strategies and recipes to utilize high-quality prepped ingredients that would otherwise go to waste. To kick us off, Abby Fammartino, Director of Health and Sustainability Programs and Research at the Culinary Institute of America, where she oversees the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, will provide us with an overview of the toolkit and methodology used to produce it. She'll then lead us in a moderated discussion with our panelists. Take it away, Abby.
Great. Thank you so much for hosting this webinar and letting us share about the wonderful toolkit. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get started on a brief presentation before we begin with the panel. So just a moment. Here we go. Okay, excellent. So again, thank you for being here. I'm Abby Fammartino. And I want to start with just a description of what the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative is. So we are co-founded by the Culinary Institute of America and Stanford Residential and Dining Enterprises and Stanford Prevention Research Center. And we are a global network of forward-thinking scholars, food leaders, chefs, nutrition, sustainability managers, students, and administrators who all collaborate together to accelerate progress toward a more sustainable, healthy, and delicious food system using evidence. And we generate that evidence by collaborating both within a university among these stakeholders and across universities, partnering together to develop scalable and applied solutions for the food service industry. And we are fortunate enough, we have over 400 members, we have 80 institutions, and we're growing each year. We are fortunate enough to collaborate with research affiliates who I'll share about on the next slide on our research agenda. So we have 3 priority areas. We focus on plant-forward diet promotion, food waste reduction, which is of course what we're talking about today, and increase food literacy for both staff and for students. And as I mentioned, we're fortunate enough to do this work with what we call our research collaborators. And these are organizations like ReFed who share insights and allow us to strengthen the generalizability of the research for the food service industry. So the project, again, we're talking about today is the Repurpose with a Purpose Toolkit. And what I wanted to start with first is a bit of a background on, why we developed this project to begin with. And this relates to the reason why this is really useful for a number of food service stakeholders. So first, economic inflation, no surprise. Rising food costs along with supply chain challenges mean that it's very critical to be resource efficient in scaled operations, especially when you want to source high quality product. Secondly, in institutions like colleges and universities where you're serving a captive audience, there are a number of menu and sourcing demands to keep things interesting, to meet a wide range of diets, and it's important to be thoughtful about the many complexities when it comes to meeting your food budget. Third, a number of members in the executive chef committee, and in particular the leaders, you'll hear from one of them today, or a couple of them today, were interested in developing a project within our research collaborative that measures chef creativity. And the thought was, wouldn't it be interesting if we could actually create research that showed measurable benefits of chefs' creativity on a food service operation, recognizing that chefs play a critical role in a profitable business. And third, sustainability reporting is increasing in terms of the demands on organizations. And this, of course, includes measuring food waste and being a part of a solution and providing data that can be scaled up within an organization. So as Nate mentioned, and these are what might be called unfun facts here, that the scale of the food waste problem in the US in particular is tremendous. And so addressing both this urgent need to improve our food waste management within food service, within the ReFed solutions for food service, maximizing product utilization was one that we identified as an opportunity that addresses the needs that I just identified for the project. And within maximizing product utilization, as Nate mentioned, in-house repurposing was one that came about as a critical and key opportunity for this group to leverage the chef creativity, work across the stakeholders within our various institutions to really measure and identify overproduced and leftover food that could be created into new and innovative dishes as a way to reduce waste, to maximize resource efficiency, and to enhance both cost effectiveness and sustainability of food operations. So this led us to this research question: what is the impact of repurposing as a food waste solution, both quantitatively and qualitatively? And what that really looks like here is we were aiming to show the impact of creative utilization as a food waste solution on the triple bottom line, both people, profit, planet, of college and university donning operations. Back here. Right, so from a project design standpoint, we were very happy to engage 9 institutions over, we had 40 individuals across various role types. At each of the 9 institutions, we worked with the chefs to collect 4 weeks of data in their kitchens. And that means that they tracked anywhere from 1 to 3 items that they had available to use. They let us know how much volume they had of that to use and what they did with it, what creative recipes they did, where it ended up. We worked with these sites and a broader set of stakeholders at those sites for a 12-week period. And the core project team worked on this for a one-year cycle. These were the participating sites. We had the 9 institutions with ReFed and Cornell University acting as part of the core project team. And we were measuring food waste reduction, what the environmental impact of repurposing was, any cost savings that were tangible from this project, and of course, any sort of social benefits or social impact from the study. We worked with the chefs as sort of lead project research designers here. The chef group identified that they wanted to have recipes incorporate at least 51% of ingredients that would otherwise be wasted. Additionally, the recipes were plant forward, where 70% of the ingredients in the recipes were from plants as a minimum. We conducted surveys and interviews with that broader set of stakeholders at each site. And then from that point, it allowed us to look thematically at what were the benefits of repurposing from a number of stakeholders at a food service operation like college and dining operation. And then, of course, we're able to quantitatively look at the benefits from food waste diversion. And while this is a project designed by chefs for chefs, it is certainly actionable for a number of food service leaders. And so we're very happy to have you all here today to share more about this project. I think we're all very proud to say that we actually produced 3 different resources from this research project. We have an operational report, which gets more into the details of the case study, the case studies presented, and more about the research that we conducted. We have a recipe collection of the recipes generated from this that were tested across institutions. And of course, today we're focusing on the operational toolkit, which shares with you ways to begin repurposing operation. And really, this is the roadmap in the toolkit. It's not only about the moment that a chef has something available to use in a kitchen and chooses to make something with it, and that's the moment of repurposing. What we found in the research is that there are a number of different steps along the process of operating a food service operation, from getting started all the way through menu planning strategies, production strategies, what can happen in daily operations, services, and then, of course, evaluation tips. So what you see here is the basically a table of contents of the different case studies that we identified. So these are tips, insights that allow you to basically develop a culture of repurposing from start to finish with measurable benefits. So let me give you some examples. Here, what you see is UCLA's stale bread case study. So a number of different they have sandwich stations. And we have, oh, sorry, here, I went back. Let me just go back one. See if I can go back. I don't want to reveal the results quite yet. Let me see here. Got it. So from the bread from sandwich stations, as you can see, it goes to their commissary. So this is a production strategy where they're leveraging a commissary to be able to divert bread that would need to be purchased for breadcrumbs, or bread purchased from scratch to make the breadcrumbs for meatballs. So what you see in this operational toolkit are particular case studies that give an example that, if scaled, I'm sure, as we know, UCLA uses their commissary a number of different opportunities like this in order to use repurposing for their cost benefit and resource efficiency. Here's another example. This is more of a daily operations strategy where there is monitoring happening in 15-minute increments where items are kept separate and then assembled together based on the volume of the customer base that they're serving. That allows for certain components that are kept separate and unused and kept at temperature to be repurposed in the future. So from a project results standpoint, what we found in just 1 month, 4 weeks of data collection here, that these institutions saved close to $20,000 in food costs, 21,000 gallons of water were diverted, and over 500,000 of carbon emissions were diverted, 500,000 tons of carbon emissions. And most importantly, what you'll hear about today is that we also improved staff morale. And just for context, this was just from the 6 recipes developed and tracked, even if more repurposing was happening at certain sites, which it was. So this was what was available on hand. So you can imagine the excitement of these findings, and we're happy to also answer your questions later about this. I want to give you just a few more slides here before we open it to the panel. This is a case study from Boston University where they were saving pineapple cores from pineapple used in other areas to make their pineapple water, and as well as vinaigrette. So instead of purchasing fresh fruits from scratch to create their flavored waters, they were using the pineapple cores. And if you track here, you can see that the cost savings and the number of servings that they did equal, a good amount of cost savings per serving, where they didn't have any costs, but they were basically saving. If they were serving 350 servings, it was close to around $1 per person that they were saving. From the pineapple vinaigrette, by making something from scratch, displacing something they would purchase and bring in, they were also having cost savings. So these little examples give you a window into the value of repurposing. From a key takeaway from the toolkit, what you'll find is there's a strong business case for sustainability in repurposing and being resource efficient. We are providing a wide range of strategies for resource efficiency. Again, it's not just that moment when you decide to repurpose with what's available on your table in the kitchen. And in fact, chef creativity has measurable benefits, which we were very happy to create this study and prove that in a number of ways, and that these tools can help reach financial and sustainability goals. We hope that you use the report and the toolkit and tailor this for your sector. If you would like to track your own data and contribute that to the in-house repurposing solutions in the database, you can contact Selena, and we hope that you will reach out to us about any questions you have around toolkit implementation. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and get into the panel aspect of this. And I'm very happy to introduce some of our key stakeholders here. We have Matt Ward, Executive Chef of Residential Dining at the University of North Texas. Ken Chang, who's a doctoral researcher at Cornell University. Lexi Razka, the Sustainability Director of Boston University Dining. Brian Cochrane, Director of Culinary Operations at Vanderbilt University. And Selena Mao, Research and Insights Manager at ReFed. So really happy to see all of these folks here. Each contributed to the project, and I'm excited to let them share more about their experience here. So first, I'm going to direct a question first to Matt, because Matt was our principal chef investigator for this project, and really helped ideate from beginning to end how this would work. So I would like to ask you, Matt, how does repurposing align with the culinary values of minimizing waste? And can you share more about how this ethos shapes day-to-day operations in your kitchen?
Yes. So Abby, doing this project, was great for us and was great for our staff. But, as far as chefs go, and like you touched, this was a project, conducted by chefs for chefs, and really what repurposing as far as chefs goes is just part of our DNA. That's really what we are doing in our operations. When you go to a restaurant or you go to a food operation, most times a chef special is a repurposing project in our kitchens. We're using up products, and we're going in our walk-ins and we're identifying products that we need to use up before it goes into the landfill. And that's the biggest thing, is that we really don't want to put any kind of food product in the trash. That's a big no-no for us. I mean, that goes against all of our beliefs as chefs. As we want to make sure that we're using every product that comes through our back doors, and we're paying homage to those products, because we're making sure that we're using those products that farmers are producing, or that food distributors are producing for us. So we want to make sure that we are using every ounce of product we have in our operations, and that comes down to watching our dollars and our dollars and cents. We want to make sure that we're using you know, we're watching that food cost, you know, and making sure, especially now that inflation is as high on food products as it is, we want to make sure that we're using those products, you know, in every way possible, and that we're clearing out the, you know, we're clearing out our walk-ins at the end of the day, and making sure we're, you know, we're taking care of the customers and those that produce those food items.
Great. Yes, and I'm going to pass it next to Brian, also in the culinary operation. So what was the most surprising thing that you learned doing this research at Vanderbilt?
What we focused on was vegetable trimmings and scraps that would normally have been composted. You know, you give a cook a case of broccoli heads to break down, and what we want is broccoli florets on a salad bar or in a saute station, and we have stems and stalks left. So taking that ethic that Matt talked about of it just hurts us to throw food away of any kind, even though we're not even throwing it away, we're composting it. So we focused on those trimmings, right? And you'll find our recipe contribution was a broccoli slaw. The most surprising result was that our cooks started coming to chefs with cambros of trimmings, scraps of every conceivable food in the dining hall, saying, what can we do with this? What can we do with this? What can we do with this? So the social impact on the culinary staff in the dining hall was radical.
Yes, and I wanted just to and maybe we'll get back to that in a second, but I think, you know, I'm most interested in hearing about from the staff morale and the social impact standpoint. You know, why do you think that was so impactful, Brian?
I just think, you know, when we talk about in MCURC, we plant forward, and one of the strategies we use is nudges, maybe moving a plant forward entree to the first part of the service line and ahead of an animal protein type. I think this was a nudge to our staff. It was just a gentle, when we said, okay, start saving those broccoli stems, and then they worked with the chef and we developed this slaw, and oh my gosh, this is good, we love this, you know. It was just a nudge that shifted the way culinarians look at food, and maybe they aren't so deeply ingrained into the industry and professionally ethic, so where they have that, oh my gosh, we can't throw anything away as a professional ethic. Their job is break down four flats of broccoli heads, you know, but all of a sudden they realize, wait, this is also food. Like, yeah, we need the florets, they're pretty, they go here, but wait, this is also food. Yeah. And we can make, you know, we can make stocks, and then they're even bringing, you know, onion skins, and we're having to say, okay, no, actually that we're going to compost, you know, doesn't yield a lot, but they want to realize that every part of the food that they touch is usable.
Yes, great. Thank you for that. So I'm going to direct this next question to Lexi, and then perhaps Brian, you can add something to this as well too. If you can describe the competitive objectives of I guess competing objectives of leading a sustainable food operation, and how repurposing might complement one or more of these objectives. And I just wanted to mention too, there's a question here around how this tool can be utilized at institutions that have dining service contract companies. And maybe Lexi, you can also note that as well from a BU perspective.
Yeah, of course. So to your first question, I think there are so many different directions that a sustainable food operation can take. There is responsible sourcing, local procurement, plant-based or plant-forward menus, other waste reduction strategies, maybe more on the post-consumer side. and other things beyond that. I think a great thing about repurposing is that it's not in competition with any other types of sustainable initiatives, but rather can be done in tandem to continue to drive the needle forward and elevate the other priorities. So for instance, as it's been mentioned a few times, the recipes in this toolkit are all plant forward. So highlighting plant-based and plant-forward recipes depending on the individual one in driving that agenda and those goals while also repurposing and reducing waste. And then on the question about contract food service accounts, this is not something specifically just for self-op accounts. Boston University is actually a contracted food service operation. So the resources are valuable to chefs regardless of who is paying their paycheck. It's something that I think everyone is interested in, and something that should be shared with your dining team. If you are someone who works for a school or an institution that has a contracted food service, definitely send the resource along, and I'm sure it will be highly valued, and some recipes might be able to be integrated into your program. So the typical constraints of the program aren't limited to who can participate.
Great. Thank you for that. And Brian, do you want to add some perspective from you leading culinary operations? You know, how does the repurposing complement any of the objectives that you have to achieve to lead a sustainable food operation?
Yeah, and I was told that my audio was a little hard to hear, so I'm going to pull the microphone up closer. Perhaps that helps. Vanderbilt University, and I'm sure all institutions have very stringent and aggressive sustainability issues, objectives that we're all held accountable for. So certainly being able to produce more with the same amount of food that we're buying makes a big difference. But I don't think it's nearly as focused on the financial as it is on, I think, the word ethic that I've used, like Matt started with. You know, we don't want to waste food. And I think our big message for our students is we're doing everything we can to minimize and mitigate pre-consumer waste. And we want to ask you to join us in that to mitigate post-consumer waste.
And I think what's nice about the toolkit and all of the number of kind of ideas for how to integrate repurposing in, there's so many opportunities there to be resource efficient. And as you said, you don't want to waste, but if your menu, for example, is planned and programmed 100%, then there's inherent waste in that. So for, one of the solutions that we presented was make room for specials, and maybe only, program 80% of your menu and allow for some repurpose. So
yeah, we have a pretty robust menu management system that interfaces with digital displays, with an app that shows what we have menued, and so we always need to be serving what is displayed, but we can certainly serve more.
Right.
We also do a lot to publish nutritional information, allergen information. So we have given all of our dining halls chalkboards, little, easel sandwich board chalkboards, and really encourage them to run LTOs, chef specials, pop-ups, and just to annotate. They can reach out to our dietitian if they want like help with analysis, but just to annotate ingredients and allergens, but highlight the creativity, and our students love it.
Yeah, wonderful. So another question, Lexi, so I shared that BU case study around the pineapple, and I wonder if you could give a bit more context about how the repurposing that you're doing, and I know that you're doing more than just with that pineapple example, have you found, that the environmental or social benefits outweigh any economic challenges or impact there?
Yeah, I think the pineapple is a really great example because that one financially makes sense. It's not one that you just have to talk about the environmental story or the social buy-in, but there are clear cost savings as well, especially with the scale of operations that we're doing at BU. With this study, it was just 4 weeks in one dining hall, but if we really spread it across campus, there are significant savings from our purchasing lemons or limes or some other fruit solely for that purpose. I think when we talk about other repurposing opportunities, there are some circumstances where the costs may be prohibitive. And so I think a great example, beyond the scope of this study, but mentioned in some of the materials, we did a dinner for students. It was a multi-course plated meal that was entirely made of repurposed menu items. And it was sort of a surprise to students towards the end of the meal that all of this delicious food had been repurposed. But one of those items had been a handmade tortelloni that was using leftover squash soup that had then been turned into the filling of that tortelloni. That was a very labor-intensive process to make that. And so I think looking at the scale of residential dining, some of those more labor-intensive foods are likely going to be cost prohibitive towards implementing at scale. It might be something that could be done for a small pop-up or a special event, or more likely in a catering setting, or just non-all-you-care-to-eat setting. So I think there certainly is a balance, but definitely focusing on the opportunities that can be done at scale. And then when we can add in some of those higher value or higher labor opportunities, adding them in as well.
Great. And, this was something we set out at the beginning to discuss as well. Should we focus on certain ingredients that are have a high environmental impact and a high cost, like meat and other things, to really showcase even greater cost savings? But ultimately, we left it up to the chefs to work with the available product because it's more of a real life scenario. And while we know that by saving more kind of meat scraps or other meat that could be repurposed, we may yield higher economic impact from the research. There's also something to say about the sites like UNT, Matt. You are often repurposing all the time. And so therefore your operation, maybe the recipes and what was in the toolkit didn't yield as high of an economic impact, but has a real big impact on the culture of your team and your environmental footprint of the operation overall, because you're already integrating it a lot. So you'll see a range of examples in the toolkit there. I'm going to segue now to Ken to share more about the research. And we have two sub-questions that came about. I was hoping you could talk about the challenges of calculating savings from repurposing. What did we have to adjust in the approach? And in particular, maybe some quick ones you can talk about first is for cost savings, did we include labor? Why and why not? And then you could share maybe more about what displaced refers to in food service.
Yeah, sure. So I guess to address those initial questions, for the displaced recipe, we were comparing the realized benefits of repurposing within those kitchens to the recipes that those kitchens would have been serving otherwise had they not been using those repurposed ingredients. So I believe in the document and in the report, when we refer to displaced, that's what we're referencing. And then beyond that, I was just trying to sort this out with Selena in chat, but we had decided to exclude labor costs from the considerations, I think in part because we weren't sure how well we would be able to model those implications at an operational level, given the heterogeneity between the different sites that we included in the study. And then beyond that, I think because, as Matt had mentioned, the practice of repurposing in some ways is kind of already central to how these sites operate. So I guess we were not confident with inserting those costs, given that we weren't sure in practice how that actually materializes training-wise.
Yeah, and I think what we heard from the chefs is, and this kind of leads into a subsequent question around some of the barriers, but I think if you have salaried labor that's there for 8 or 9 hours and they're producing things, they're going to either take their time to produce this or that. And at the end of the day, you're still serving food that meets the same population. And therefore we felt it was harder to figure out exactly how to calculate that, knowing that it may be fairly close in a production standpoint. But maybe Ken, you can share more about some of the other challenges and sort of how you went about the approach to calculating savings from repurposing.
Sure. I guess I'll share like one challenge and then one like persistent limitation that I think is probably also worth raising. But I would say that the primary data challenge that we were confronted with was around data fidelity. So like with any other project, wanting to ensure that the data that we were wrangling was actually representative of the benefits that were truly and really happening within the actual sites themselves. So this really meant practically working with site operators to clarify the information that was provided to us. That way, when we were presented with units that were unfamiliar to like the data team, like Lexons of Arugula, then we knew how to perform those conversions in ways that are actually representative of what was happening. And on the other hand, I would say the primary data challenge or the data limitation associated with this project is that really we're just modeling the implications associated with this weeks long research sprint. So the longer arc of the benefits that we suspect are still happening within these sites are not reflected in the report, which is all just to say that there's more to there's a larger data narrative when it comes to this story. So I guess just stay tuned.
Yes, that's a really good point, that it doesn't end there, but we wanted to set up this investigation as something that was easy to execute for the chefs and the sites and look at a finite time period. And that's really what the snapshot of the toolkit represents from a quantitative data analysis perspective. Whereas some of the recommendations, of course, are something that will continue to be, a sort of evergreen advice on how to repurpose. So let's get a bit into the barriers to repurposing, because people here on the call may have questions about, is this possible, especially from a labor standpoint? So I'm going to pass this first to Matt, and maybe Brian, you can add a little bit as well too. But if you can share more about what you feel and what you heard around the biggest barriers to repurposing and how they can be addressed.
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier is buy-in. It's employee staff buy-in. Chef, why should we do this? It's just easier to throw it in the trash and make this fresher dish, or make this dish. It's easier. We already have the stuff. So really, it's a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of gathering the team up. Sharing facts on food waste. Here at UNT, we do a lot of storytelling, whether it's to engage students with our special events. But we've also found that while we do these special events, the staff is involved in the planning of those special events, and they're given the liberty to be creative when we do these special events. So that's where we have buy-in on these initiatives that we try to put into place. When you start to involve your frontline employees in the planning and the menu development, that's when you start to see the buy-in, and then they start to take pride in what they're doing and the menus they're coming up with and the products. And then you get the feedback from the students that are coming in and enjoying what we've put out for them. It all comes full circle. So that's the biggest barrier we've seen is frontline staff buy-in on what we're doing, and I think that's the biggest joy we see, is when everybody buys in. It then becomes, we may start an initiative in one dining hall, and then it catches fire, and then it's, hey, chef, we heard that, we heard the staff at, Eagle Landing is doing these repurposing initiatives. They sound cool. When can we start to do those things over here? So it catches fire, and and then it becomes a whole dining services initiative and whatnot. So that's pretty much the barrier. Higher up, numbers are always, everybody wants to know what the numbers are. How much are we saving? And I think a lot of companies are being forced, and rightfully so, to be have initiatives, sustainability initiatives as part of their daily operations. So that too comes into the operation as well.
Yeah. And Brian, I know one thing we heard from some of the sites in the interviews was that training staff to understand how to repurpose could be a perceived barrier. And I wonder if you could also address that here.
Well, just like Matt said, we experienced everything that Matt was describing. So it's shifting a habit, but that's what has to happen in our world anyway, right? So we might as well be the torchbearers for changing habits. So yeah, there a little bit of hesitancy, and I would say that when we got over that barrier is when the chef worked with the staff. Go ahead and just let's take all your trimmings. What have we got? What could we do? You know, brainstorm, the buy-in, like Matt was talking about. Ultimately, needing the chef's expertise, what their job is to make it flavorful, make it beautiful, right? Once the staff tasted what we were doing, they overcame their, wait a minute, but this is scraps, you know, and all of a sudden it was a delicious something, right? You know, and it's purely anecdotal, so Kim, don't freak out because there's no research behind us. But I can tell you, it didn't cost us any overtime. When the question about labor, staff's going to be producing anyway, it didn't cost us any overtime to do this. That's for sure.
Great. And so I'm gonna switch gears to Selena, and from a data perspective, what kinds of data and in what formats do they need to be in for dining operations to calculate the impact of repurposing in the future? And I think this speaks to what Matt said, is more companies are asking for sustainability data. How do you go about measuring repurposing? What did they need to know about here?
Yeah, I think if I were to give like the sort of in a nutshell answer, for us, the most important metric is really calculating the weight of food that was repurposed, and all of those really impressive metrics that you showed, Abby, at the beginning of this presentation, that are really sort of serve as the comprise the evidence base of why repurposing is such an impactful solution. Cost savings, the metric tons of GHG. The way that we go about calculating those is all a function of the weight of food that was repurposed. And so I just want to emphasize, like, and I think Ken mentioned this, by weights, we mean the sort of either metric or imperial based on where you are in the world, what food ends up getting sort of incorporated into recipes. I think one of the significant challenges that Ken had alluded to is, that some of the ingredient quantities that were sort of documented were sometimes given in various units, such as counts and cases and eaches. And so to the extent possible that you can sort of start to translate how much in pounds or in kilograms of potatoes you were able to repurpose, that allows us to sort of equate that to the dollar value as well as to the corresponding sort of greenhouse gas footprint of each ingredient. And the second point that I want to mention is that, Abby, you just alluded to this study sort of spanned the course of several weeks, and just saving $50,000 in food cost savings alone over that time period is only in reference to 14 recipes. We know that there's probably so much untapped potential in terms of what more can be done. And so I think to that effect, understanding and starting to set up a framework for quantifying and measuring how much pre-consumer surplus you have available at hand to repurpose, and then from that, how much you are actually reworking into recipes allows us to get a better sense of what the sort of remaining opportunity is, and to what extent we are improving upon certain, or we can leverage different kinds of strategies and tactics and repurposing. So I guess really comes down to tracking the weight of what gets repurposed, but also understanding what you have at hand to repurpose. And then from there on out, calculating the cost savings, really, if you tie a pound, a number of pounds to the dollar per pound that you paid for, it's really easy to sort of streamline the downstream calculations.
That sounds great. And thank you for outlining that. And I think this touches on a question I'm going to ask in a bit, and I see some of the audience questions. We'll weave those in as well. But I think it seems like setting up from our perspective a framework for, you know, how we measure, and then defining that as a reminder what you're displacing. So if you're tracking what you're doing with it, and also you didn't have to make that recipe, instead you have this repurposed one, that's really where you can start to track your cost savings and really the impact that you could have. So speaking of these metrics and indicators, I know that it's in some cases you need to get this buy-in, as you're talking about, Matt and Brian, not only from your frontline staff, but from a number of stakeholders on the value of repurposing. So, you know, maybe several of you can share about this, on how this toolkit can help convince stakeholders to begin a repurposing program or to maintain one throughout their operation. Maybe Lexi, and then Selena and Matt.
Yeah, so I think one of the really great things about repurposing is there isn't an upfront cost. You don't need infrastructure. You don't need anything special to start repurposing. You just need the ingredients that you are otherwise wasting. So I think it's often easier to get buy-in, and sometimes easier to pilot something and then share the successes to get people excited to support the expansion of something. But I think the different types of metrics that you would convey to different stakeholders would depend on their interests. So if you're looking to convey the program to a sustainability office, waste-related metrics on how much less waste you're sending to the landfill or incineration, or even composting, anaerobic digestion, all of that would be of interest. I think if you're trying to just get more buy-in from operators or whoever manages your budget, any type of financial impacts or staff engagement impacts, I think, would be valuable there. But again, I think the great thing about this is you might not necessarily need the buy-in and the hoops that you might for some other type of program that requires you to really install equipment or bring in a lot of costly things to get started.
That's true. And not everyone in the who participated had a food waste measurement system in their kitchen that would track with data how easy that is. Some did and some didn't. Some were just using pen and paper, or pencil and spreadsheet. And so that's one important thing. And maybe, Lexi, before I pass it over to Selena and Matt, you could touch on, there's a question around if whether or not we measured consumer receptiveness of repurposed food, and consumers are, of course, a stakeholder in this. And so maybe you could just speak to what you did, and we do address this in the toolkit just a bit about the sites that tested that, but there's some follow-on work we can do.
Yeah, so we didn't have any signage at the specific items. It was something that we thought about. Do we add something to our menus or put tabletop signage out at the stations? We didn't end up doing that, but we did promote on social media and our website and in newsletters that we were doing this program. So students were aware and were excited about it. I think the best example I can provide of how stakeholders felt about repurposing is both the student event I mentioned earlier, as well as a catered meal we did for senior university leadership. We made with entirely repurposed menu items and didn't present it as being anything different from the norm. And at the end of the meal, shared that. That way people didn't go into the meal with any preconceived notions about what waste would be. And then they would hopefully have their mind blown and think about waste in a different way that they could then internalize into their own lives, or just think differently about when we do start talking about repurposing, they might have a more positive attitude towards it because they don't see any difference in quality.
Great. Thank you for that. And that's something to come. I think we thought a lot about whether or not we would do a consumer-facing test of this, and that might be something that we do as a 2.0 version of the project, which will be kind of touching upon the next question. But before we move on, maybe Matt and Selena, if you have anything else to share about the metrics that are important from your perspective to gain buy-in.
Yeah, I think the metrics, like food cost is a big one. That's always one that's very important in food operations. You know, that's really, as far as buy-in goes, you know, we've had a couple of universities reach out to us asking us, hey, how do we start? And I always say, start small. You know, start small. If it's 1 dish a day, 2 dishes a day, and then a special event, you know, that's where you just build a momentum from there. So really that's how you get started, and that's how you continue to build a momentum in your organization. So
Selena, did you have anything else you wanted to share? I think you touched on some of that in your prior answer.
Yeah, I think Matthew and Lexi kind of covered it. You know, it's what's going to matter. The indicator that is the most sort of impactful and resonant will depend on the stakeholder that you're trying to get buy-in from. And so, you know, it's important to sort of figure out who your audience is. But yeah, I think Lexi and Matt sort of nailed it.
Great. And so there was a question in here from, let me see, Ren, around if there's a county or local government wants to encourage local food businesses and institutions to engage in the toolkit, would you recommend replicating the 4-week study by engaging local institutions on the local regional level? Seems like the cultural impact from engaging the chef-driven research sprint was very impactful. And I'm curious, you know, what do you all think of that? I think that this could be interesting. There, you know, there's a framework really to think about it, but
I think the energy, yeah, I think the energy came from the creativity. So, you know, perhaps in a rollout meeting with the businesses, present some highlights of the toolkit, look what happened in 4 weeks across 9 institutions, tracking 1 or 2 dishes kind of thing, just at the highlight level, and not let it, I mean, we all bought in as research participants because we are deeply ingrained in the research collaborative. So we had the buy-in, we want to change the world, you know. So, and we love Chef Matt, and when he said, let's do it, we said, we're doing, you know. So I think, yeah, you know, pitch it, look what happened here, but tap into the creativity. Absolutely. If you want to have a little friendly competition or an expo night or something like that at the end where people can vote on what their favorite thing was, but if you just get culinarians creating, you're going to win.
Yeah. And I think in some cases, it seems like the competition part of it helped. So maybe setting it up as a, you know, a competition to see if people weigh and repurpose. And we have some plans related to this that I'll share in a moment toward the end here. But I think, you know, there's creative, like healthy competition inspires creativity also. So that could be a good way to channel it. And I think the suggestions Brian made provide the key insights and get people inspired and get the chefs thinking creatively would be great. Another question here, and we touched upon the receptiveness of the consumer facing research. That is something that we're thinking about as a 2.0 version of this, is really to test that further and really what's the right language. One of the barriers we heard there was just that people felt like if we label it repurpose, people may perceive it that we're giving them leftovers or something that should be in the trash. So there's some more work to do about fine tuning that. But as Lexi mentioned, really presenting it, and they did this at San Jose State University as well, too, is making the food delicious and then sharing the information at the end. People were really surprised, and then their perception shifted. And I think that what you're hearing here is we need the perception shift and the nudges both on the staff side and on the consumer side. One more question is, it says, well, they're actively incorporating food repurposing into the food donation program training for the food service clients. So this is just more of a reflection. So thanks for the toolkit. We're happy to provide. And so maybe what we can answer next is like, what's next for this project? And maybe I'll share it. Anyone who wants to share what's next. We've had good reception so far. So we are thinking, I'm going to pass it to Matt.
I mean, my hope is that this evolves as a project and the recipe toolkit, you know, continues to grow. I know for the research sprint, I mean, each location had 20 recipes that they came up with, but we decided to share 2 per location. So the content is there. We just need to refine it and to share it out. But that's my biggest hope, is that the toolkit evolves and the recipes, you know, become more robust as we go. I know here at UNT, repurposing has definitely is on the front burner now. You know, we've done the plant forward and plant based, and I think we've nailed that and we've got that down. Now we have shifted now to more sustainability and what can we do, you know, for planet Earth, you know, as far as food waste.
Yeah, so probably stay tuned on the website. We'll probably continue to add recipes from the MCURC chefs on our recipe collection over the course of this year that focusing on repurposing. Anyone else want to share what's next or anything else we've discussed?
Well, I think another opportunity area for continued creativity is really looking at opportunities around repurposing with animal proteins, especially from financial and sustainability opportunities. For a number of reasons, plant forward recipes were the focus of this, but when you talk about cost saving opportunities and greenhouse gas emissions and water savings and all of that, I think creating animal based recipes that are using those repurposed animal proteins, I think has a lot of opportunity and something hopefully exciting down the line.
Yeah, and we've discussed kind of a culinary challenge and could we replicate, to your point, Ren, could we replicate this 4-week challenge other times to build more data and to maybe focus it, as Lexi mentioned, on recipes that feature more, divert more animal protein waste. And so it's something that may come about. We are planning for I hope to see many of you at the Menus of Change Leadership Summit this June, which is a Culinary Institute of America program. We are going to be creating a repurposed solution recipe challenge, a solutions competition. So stay tuned about that. But we would love to hear from you if you are repurposing or beginning to, and you've come up with some interesting recipe or solution at your operation. This will be a chance for you to submit about that. And that will be, the winners will be announced in June. And then the other thought from a CIA perspective is we've also thought about whether or not we can build a training around repurposing. And could this be a micro-credentialing opportunity for frontline staff to build a really critical skill for food service now and into the future? So this will be something that may take longer, but we are thinking about that. And yeah, anyone else have anything to share before we close it out here? I'm going to pass it over to Nate.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to you, Abby, for such a great discussion. And thanks to all of you out there for taking time from your busy schedules to join us. I know we covered a lot of information today, and as a reminder, we will be sharing this recording, so you'll receive that soon. If you want to learn more about the topic and what our panelists are doing, you can connect with them using the contact information that we'll include in the follow-up email. And if you want to get in touch with Refed, please use the contact information on the screen. Have a great rest of your week, and bye-bye.